Okay. So here we are. So we're talking about sales versus customer success and the essential sort of common skills and differences. And this is going to kick off a series of sessions where we're going to dig into this. And it was actually inspired when I was talking to Bob London, because he talks about discovery questions. And I started getting into, let me just go to this, where I don't know if you ever heard me talk about how when you're selling, there's a few different elements that need to be in place, right? And I posted about this today, and I have a link to that in the resources in these slides as well. But it's a few things. It's to sell, you need to be trusted, right? Because you don't buy from a product from someone you don't trust, right? Like when you think about that used car salesman, like if you get, you always think about like sort of the EBGBs from that, right? Like you don't buy from someone that you feel like, I don't know, that was some sort of slimy, I don't know, that just didn't feel right. No, I just didn't want to sell from them, right? Or buy from them, right? So you don't buy from someone that you don't trust. The other is you need to identify if it's a right person, right product, right time, right? And so I'll talk through that a little bit, but there's differences still between what happens when you're selling in the pre-sales motion versus the post-sales motion. And so part of that too then is, well, I want to try and like tell you everything at once. So let me first start off with right person, right product, right time. When you're in the pre-sales motion, and can I get a raise hands? Is there anybody here who's been in a sales role before? Yeah, Ramanya? I have. Fabian? Sean, you've been in sales? Hallie? Great. Anybody else? Okay. Eleni? Great. So if you've been in sales before, part of what you're sort of doing in that pre-sales motion is you want to be sure you're talking to the right person, right? And if you're not talking to the right person, then you got to keep networking, or you got to see if they'll help introduce you to the right person, right? Like you have to kind of keep searching. But the fact that you talk to that person, that doesn't damage anything. It doesn't burn something, just when you just determine if you aren't talking to the right person, right? But so that's just one thing I want to put to the side. So that's the right person. When you're talking to that, when you find the right person, then you want to discover if you're talking to them about the right product, right? And so when you're talking to them about the right product, you're sort of kicking the tires on it. You're testing things. You're trying to see like, what are their pain points? What do they actually need, right? And is that something that your product does? If it isn't what your product does, then you're like, oh, we're not a match. It was so great to meet you. They move along. If it is the right product, then you start to dig into that a bit more, and you start to tell them more about, why you're such a good match, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got the right time. Maybe it's the right person and the right product, but they don't have the budget for it right now, or it's something that they need, but they have a product. It hasn't, whatever, they're not going to move on from it yet, right? Or, whatever. There could be a variety of reasons why it's not the right time. Again, if it's not the right time, that's okay. You keep them in your Rolodex. You make certain you nurture them. You reach out to them occasionally. You add value. You build a relationship. So there's still then, a reason to have a relationship, right? There's nothing that's been burnt. When you think about right person, right product, and right time, and you think about it in the post-sales motion, if you're a CSM or someone in sales, if you're talking to that customer that you have who's been using your product, and if you're not talking to the right person, what happens? Anybody do that before, where you're not talking to the right person? Or if somebody's talking to you, like if you have a CSM and all of a sudden they're talking to you and trying to sell you something, you sort of like, why are you talking to me? It's like, why are you trying to sell me? What's going on here?
I would
And
think that
and
could
you
actually damage the relationship because they feel like
exactly
you don't know them.
taking oh my God, those are exact words I was going to say. Then their reaction is, you don't know me and you've damaged the relationship. You don't really care. You don't know me. You're just trying to sell me. I get you now, right? Now you have to repair that relationship, right? Or when you think about it, what if you talk to someone who's the right person, but it's not the right product? Similar kind of reaction again, right? It's like, why are you talking to me about that? I don't need that. You're just trying to sell anything you can to me, right? Like, I don't want to talk to you about that. You've burned the relationship again. You've damaged it. You need to repair it, right? And then also, if it's not the right time, think about it. Like, don't you know we've got major budget issues, or like we don't do anything in Q4. We only consider new products in Q1. Why are you talking to me about this in the wrong time? Again, you don't know me. You don't care about me. You're just trying to sell me, right? And so when you think about that, then you think about how just that initial difference is in the pre-sales motion versus the post-sales motion, and how important it is to get that right person, right product, right time. And that's why then some of the things we'll be talking about in the next few sessions, like the discovery questions, why that's so critical, right? To understand that about the customer if you're going to be bringing up these types of things in the post-sales motion. And again, that doesn't really matter if it's a CSM or the salesperson. Of course, if you don't really know your customers very well, just across the board, maybe it is better to have someone who's, an account manager or a salesperson doing those faux pas, because then they can come back to you, the CSM, and say, why are they trying to do that? Oh, I don't know. I'll talk to them. When you know all along, like, oh, we're trying to sell you this, kind of thing. But again, that's still a faux pas that your company is creating issues, right? That you don't want that type of experience with your company, and then you're the only one that they trust. And then when you leave, then they don't trust anybody at the company anymore, right? That's still a problem for the company. Right. Now, Fabian and Sean, I think that you had your hands up from before, or did you have comments or questions? Sean, did you have a question?
No,
or
no
comment?
No,
question. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
just sorry, I'm at softball practice again today as well. Just acknowledging your question. I don't have anything to add unless
okay.
you'd like me to.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to double check because you've still got your hand up. So.
Oh, my bad. Mobile.
No worries. Randall, though, I think you just put your hand up. Did you have a question or a comment?
I completely agree with that. I guess the question is, and I've had conversations with, with different people about this, is the right place, right product, right time, but also is that hunter and gatherer mentality as far as how you go about selling that's different to find the right person, right product at the right time. Because that's one of the things I think when you're going to a sales role versus a CS role, and how they look at those two sales process differently, and how they want a person that's been in a sales role and had that experience to have that hunter type of mentality versus a gatherer mentality that you need more in a CSM type role.
So certainly when you're working with customers, you have that farming mentality, but part of why you're building up the relationship, and that gets into sort of the land and expand, is that there is a business imperative that in a subscription-based business, how do I put this? The cost of acquisition for a customer is not covered usually with just with what they purchase. It usually takes somewhere between 12 and 24 months to break even on the cost of acquisition and all of those things, right? And that's why it's so important not just to renew, but to also expand that business. The question about who is doing the selling in that post-sales motion, it isn't so much that you need to hunt exactly with your customers. Like when you're hunting as a salesperson, you are literally looking for people who are the right match for your product, right? Whereas when you already have a customer, that's why it's referred to farming. because you're basically cultivating that relationship, cultivating them, you know, in terms of they adopt and they optimize the product so that then they're prepared to renew and to expand their business with you. Right. And so it's not so much about if you're going to do selling, it's a type of selling and who you're selling to. And that's what I'm trying to sort of draw the distinction between, that when you're selling to a prospect versus when you're selling to a customer, how it's sort of a different circumstance and how necessary it is to really understand and have built that trust with your customer in order to either renew or expand with them. Does that make sense? And that essentially is the selling process, frankly.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and so that gets into a little bit of the business imperative of land and expand, but let me get to the rest of that right after I talk about grass is greener syndrome. And when you think about the grass is greener, when you have a customer, when you're going, say, through renewals, or if you're trying to go through product expansion, whether you're upselling or cross-selling, you may have a customer who is feeling a little burnt by working with your product. And maybe it was a challenging, maybe it was challenging to actually onboard with you. Maybe that wasn't, they didn't expect that it would be so challenging. They didn't know that they'd have to do anything for onboarding. Maybe they thought it was going to be so easy that like they didn't even have to show up for onboarding, right? Like sometimes there's a mix of messages, right? Or maybe they got frustrated and in that they felt like they poured their heart and soul out to the salesperson, and then they met you and you didn't know anything about them. Right? Maybe that sales to CS handoff didn't go very smoothly. And then they had to explain themselves all over again, right? You know, like that feels like customer friction. Or when they're trying to adopt it, we know from anybody who's joined in the past, the change management involved when you're trying to adopt or optimize using a product, right? And so if that didn't go very successfully and they're not really using it very widely, or you don't have champions that have really moved over into your product to champion your product, right? Then again, when they get to that sort of renewal or expansion, they might be sort of looking over there and going, well, that product, that's shiny and new. That's got a lot of whistles. Maybe that one's better. Maybe that one would have been easier. Maybe I would have fallen in love if I just, you know, purchase that product instead, right? And they get sort of that grass is greener over there, right? And so when something like that happens, you want to think about then what are the friction points that your customer has leading up? You know, are they actually ready to expand? Have they actually fully adopted your product, or have they actually adopted, or have they even optimized it? Are they even ready to purchase this other product? Would they get value from it? Is it a business imperative for them, right? So that's something to think about, that and that gets into the land and expand. So there's a business imperative for your own company, right? And you actually, in order to stay in business, need to renew and expand business with that customer in order to stay in business. You figure out what your break-even point is, right? That might be 12 months in, or 18 or 24 months in, hopefully not longer than that, right? You think about what that customer lifetime value is, how long your customers on average are staying around, some things like that. If anybody hasn't gotten my post-sales revenue leadership guide from my website, I'll put it in the chat, because that gives you some ideas about some of that. You can get it from my website here. But you want to think about then, you know, some of those things here in terms of how you're going to stay in business, right? As a revenue leader, in a post-sales revenue leader. But then why might it be a disservice to your customer if you don't sell them another product that you have? How could that ever be possible? Any thoughts on where I might go with that? Have you found that?
Can you say that one more time, Jan?
Okay, so I just was talking about the business imperative, why it's so important that we renew and expand business with our customers, right? We know it's important for our business. We go out of business if we don't. But why is it so important to our customer that we actually sell them another product? Why could it be important to them?
Because presumably the product we sell is going to help them. Right? So we'd be almost irresponsible if we didn't. It's just, I think approaching that with the customer must be tricky, right?
Well, it's only tricky if we haven't laid the groundwork, but yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. And I see Trevor in the Slack, he's talking about it also can reduce their overall vendor reliance. Yeah. Simplifies their tech stack. Debbie's talking about value.
Maybe
Ernesto.
maybe there is a minimum proposition or minimum product that we usually would go with. I know in my experience, that was our philosophy, and it worked for 80% of the customer contingent. I don't know if that's the philosophy overall, but that was exactly that we go with the minimum. There's like this diagram of expanding a square, I think it was, and you start here, and then the minimum for the contract, and then you expand the contract, and that's expected.
Yes, yes. So when that's another reason why then startups are working on building out other products to be able to expand too, right? Once they've hit product market fit. But it's actually, if you think about what the customer needs to be successful, easier integrations. There's lots of great reasons. So when you think about for their business goals, for what they're trying to achieve in their business, if they have a pain point that needs to be solved for, that your product solves for, but they don't know about it and they don't know to buy it from you, well, what are they going to do? They're going to try to solve that business pain point. So they go looking out on the marketplace and they go and get some other product that doesn't work very well with yours, right? And they go and purchase it there. And now they say, well, I've got your product, I've got this product, we already bought it. And there's, that sunken, cost, sort of thing. Now they've got it. They want to hold on to it. They're not going to let go. They just put all that money out for it, right? So they're going to keep that other product that doesn't work very well with yours and it doesn't integrate very well. And now they have another tech stack, they have a more complicated tech stack, all of those things. And so they're not actually even going to meet their business, needs and their goals as efficiently and effectively as if you had actually said, hey, I know you have this pain point. We have this product. Seems like it might be a good match. Why don't we have some discussions around it? Let me tell you more about it. Does it seem like a match for you, right? Where you have it as part of a conversation and it doesn't even feel so salesy because, when I say that, you know what I mean, like used car sales. But what it feels like is, you know me, you get me, you care, you want to solve my pain points, right? And it actually does help them. In some cases, it can help people get promoted because they're working more effectively and efficiently. And then you can put on your resume, I help people get promoted. I coached somebody once who has helped 6 people get promoted, right? Like she put that as one of her highlights in her resume. Can you say that, right? Those types of things. So you connect it then to a benefit to them, right? To a business benefit. And if it is a business benefit, they should buy it. And if it isn't a business benefit, you shouldn't be trying to sell it to them, right? Ramanya.
I've thought about that. And I guess my way to think of it and accept that is the analogy of like a doctor with a patient, where the doctor knows more based on experience, like you're showing these symptoms and I will expect you to start getting this and this further down the line. That is why I'd like us to start working on this regimen, for example. Because like the part that to me is a little bit troublesome is not to be arrogant. Like I know more what you need and you don't. so the analogy with sort of the partnership, I don't want to say it like a hierarchical doctor and patient, but in a partnership. So I think that that tone and like the way you approach it, like you were saying, is super important not to be salesy. It has to come from a place of that deep understanding. Is that
exactly a place
like,
from deep understanding, which is why next week we're going to be talking about radically authentic discovery, right? How you get this information is through discovery, right? And then when you get this information from them and you get them to articulate their pain points, you get them to articulate that they want, you know, what the value is in solving these pain points. And that's why also you'll see in that's some of the things in the resources here with some of the frameworks and some of the things they have around sales, like when you're looking at MedPick or Medic, Spiced, you know, all these different things. What part of what you're getting to is those discovery questions you answer, you know, you have them answer for you actually, like what impact and what value it's going to have. Because when they say it themselves, when they articulate it, then they say, wow, I need this. I want this product. What do you have for me? Help me solve my problems. Oh yeah, I can help you. And then you become, you know, this person who's helping them through this, which is the position we like to be in, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point, Jan. The framework that you mentioned, and probably something that shouldn't be underemphasized from a standpoint of an earlier stage company where you may not have the luxury of partnering with account managers or maybe working with AEs who are primarily focused on net new business, ensuring you have some basic framework in place to actually conduct a little bit of a sales process, right? Whether you want to call it sales or not, you're actually doing discovery and requalifying that customer in an ongoing basis. Like that is a big part of the customer feedback loop that we talk about in other conversations. So I think that's something that definitely can't be underemphasized, and something that, going back to your original question about, you know, at least my experience starting my career in sales, having this part of my foundation when I've worked with customers and bringing that into my experience building customer success as well.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And by asking those questions and eliciting that information from them, getting them to explain their pain points, that kind of stuff, all of those kinds of things help you to understand how to help them. Also, that gives you insights as to how much they've adopted or optimized their product. And if there's some things you need to do to set them up for success before you actually, you know, sell them on a new product and have to adopt, you know, onboard and adopt and optimize that new product, right? And so you have those insights and can actually do that more successfully in some cases. Kathy, did you have something to share? And then maybe we can go to breakout groups.
Yeah, this is kind of going back to the beginning almost, but I was thinking that if you don't see that coming, where the customer is going to buy some other piece from some other company, it's almost, that should never happen, right? Because you're in a conversation with them, like we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And the other thing I just wanted, before we go to the group, Trevor was talking about, you know, is this something where it's a CSM that does the selling, or the AE or SDR? SDRs usually do outreach on outgoing. They're SDRs, if they're doing outgoing to your customers, that's a great way to really make them angry, frankly. Some companies will do that, but they usually have higher churn rates. But yeah, so there's it sometimes will get passed back over to AEs. It just depends. But I personally think that it's because it is such a sensitive process in the post-sales motion, it's better led by a CS team in most cases, but there's always variations on that. So there's no hard and fast rule. It's more about what makes sense for your organization. So, okay, so we're going to go to breakout groups. Just want to remind you, I put this in bold. You want to just quickly go through, you know, have your LinkedIn ready to share it with your breakout group, and make certain that you can connect there and in our Slack community. But we just want to go real quick through the intros and spend most of our time on the breakout questions. Okay, so all right, anything else before we head out? All right, and then also just to keep in mind, please be sure to, can we put in the chat again, the breakout notes and the and also the slides resources? Either Kathy or Nikki. And Trevor, what was the last question before we go?
Yeah, very brief. So would you say that if you were to broad strokes it, that CS is relatively left to the discovery of the expansion, and then the expansion is then passed off to sales?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, I've seen that happen with some teams. I've seen that go terribly wrong with some teams. I've seen a lot of, in fact, our negotiation session is going to be led by someone who's just strictly focuses on renewals and expansions. She's going to co-lead the session on negotiation. And, you know, it's something where it depends sometimes in the organization though, legacy, that's the case, or sometimes it just makes sense for capacity or, you know, that whatever, it varies. If you're dealing with procurement or legal, you know, for a product, it could be that it takes a long time and it doesn't make sense for a CSM to do. I've seen a $200 million company where the CSM is still doing the sales. I've seen $100 million companies where they could never do it if they didn't have a separate renewals, a manager and that sort of thing. So it's more about getting the motion right. If you're going to be switching back and forth, why is that and how are you doing it and how are you setting up that? But all right, I've got some breakout rooms set up. I'm going to create them. Everybody have your links. We'll come back in 20 minutes or we'll come back in 18 minutes. All right. All right.
We're back.
Yeah. How did it go? How was the discussion? Any highlights? Any, you
Yeah,
know,
we all agree,
ahas?
none of us, that we don't like having to sell. We don't like having to be the one to close the deal. We,
Yo.
you know, I mean, at least everyone in our group was like, yeah, we don't like.
Not into that. Good. Good
I
discovery.
feel like the customer doesn't know if they can trust you. I think it ruins the trust in the relationship. Because they
That's
don't know
interesting because, you know, I totally experienced it otherwise. So, you know, I don't think it necessarily has to go that way, but I think it's really interesting
maybe
to
it's
hear
just
that.
how I feel about it. So
Maybe sometimes, you know, the way you feel about it, then you end up, you know, putting that on the situation. But yeah, it should be fun then when we talk about negotiations in a few weeks, right?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. What other things did any aha moments or discoveries, personal discoveries? What came up? Anybody? What kinds of topics came up? Or is everyone comfortable with selling? We all just going to go out and start selling tomorrow?
From our
we had-
group, it was mostly concerns about like the relationship aspect.
Mhm.
And also the other big one was like the lack of getting to have that experience. Like oftentimes they get to secure, like they get it started, but then they have to hand it off to somebody else. And they would kind
Right.
of like to have the responsibility of seeing it all the way through, but it's not always how it's set up at their company.
Right. Right. Yeah. Practice makes perfect, right? If you don't practice it, how do you ever feel comfortable with it?
Well, one of
Yeah.
the things, I was in the group with Fran and we both, like all of us, I think we're not comfortable with the selling, and that we just feel like to grow your customer, it's an automatic thing just by relationship building and recommendations and just knowing your customers. But one of the things I was thinking of from like my previous lives is like all the salespeople have had intensive training.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as a customer success manager, like nobody has ever taught me, let's say, how to sell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do it, I do it, you know what I'm saying? And I've had the extensive training in my past, just because of positions that I have, even though I wasn't never directly sales, but I don't feel like the training's there. That was
Not usually, right? Yeah. Yeah. Or if it is, it's as if you were going out doing the hunting, and where is that training for the post sales, right?
Mhm.
Because it is a different motion. You're working with someone you've already built a relationship with for the most part, right? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. Jill, you're not on mute and you're nodding your head. You want to share something?
Well, we were just talking about the fact that some of us were comfortable with sales and some of us just weren't. I was talking about the fact that I don't want a number to have to push, because I want to deal with creating a relationship with my customer, right? If something organically comes up and I can easily use that relationship to say, hey, have you thought about this? Because this will make your life easier. That's comfortable. But if there's a number on my head where I have to come up with a certain amount of dollars when I know that my customers are struggling, budgets are tight, I don't want to have to do that. That just feels unnatural and wrong.
Well, yeah, is if you're trying to push something because of your business imperative and you're not taking into account the customer imperative, right? If it's not really imperative for them, why are you pushing something on them, right? Like, get that lemon away from me, used car salesman, right?
But another Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why I just put the link again to the post sales revenue leadership thing, because one of the key things I mentioned is projecting your pipeline. And we'll be talking about pipeline in a couple of sessions. We're talking about CSQLs and pipeline, and we'll talk about it again when later in March. But that's part of it too, right? Because if you project the number, then you know who's actually ready to buy and who has that imperative for which type of product, what's referred to as white space, right? Who's ready for that white space. But if you're not projecting it, if it comes down from on high, right? And all of a sudden you're just supposed to go out and try and find this revenue. Well, unless you have thousands of customers where the law of averages is like, okay, yeah, probably I can get that. Like you're trying to sell a lemon to somebody, right? You're trying to sell something to someone who doesn't need it. That burns the relationship. Why would they ever trust you again after that?
A good point that Eleni brought up, though, was that
What's that?
You're better off having a number tied to your job, because maybe you're less likely to get laid off then, because you're actually revenue generating.
Yep.
Which
And,
yeah, that was
again,
why I got
that's also in there, because if you're not revenue generating, you're cogs. And that's why a lot of people were like, why is CS getting laid off? Don't they know how essential we are? Well, you're cogs, and they had to reduce cogs to get to profitability, right? But if you are tied to a number and you're contributing to that, then you're not part of cogs. You're part of the revenue generators, and that's a different part of OpEx. And that's exactly why. And that's why then if you project your number instead of a number getting pushed on you and you're burning relationships, then you actually create healthier relationships where people are buying products they need and you have a stronger relationship. But that's why it's so critical as leaders, we know to set that up so that our CSMs aren't going out there burning all the relationships, right? Yeah, I wish I was in that room. That would have been fun to chat about. Trevor,
is the takeaway that we all need sales training?
Well, we all need to get whatever skills we need that help us in our overall job. For some people it's that, for others, it varies. But if this is a gap for you, then yeah, think about, but there's lots of resources in the slides too. And Trevor, what's on your mind here?
Yeah, relatedly, one of the things that we talked about is, like Kai was talking about, at the end of the day, it is about revenue. And so proving the value of what you're doing. But what we were talking about is it's difficult to sort of define value sometimes if you're not, being told that you need to sell because of all of the reasons we've talked about. But how do you show the value in terms of like all the hidden costs that would come up if you don't do what you're doing, even if you're not like pushing product in terms of like, okay, well, if they left, they churned, and then you lost out on X revenue, and then you have to spend X amount to find a new customer, or you know, so on and so forth, because a lot of those are intangible. Yep. And they can't really be measured ahead of time as much necessarily, or they're a lot more difficult to figure out. Like, how do you make that also you know, top of mind or aware,
right,
for like leadership?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the thing too, is if you're projecting what's happening with your accounts, and there are some accounts that don't need these additional products, or they're in a financial situation where they're not expanding on anything. If they have to do something, they'll just put it on Google Sheets this year, right? Because they also need to try and focus on profitability this year. So in that case, there's a lot of companies that instead of focusing on NRR, and what is NRR? It's both. Anybody want to chime in on NRR? It's looking at your retention, right? And
Yeah,
your
how much you started with at the time frame and how much you ended in, you know, not including new sales. So churn and upsell is included in that calc, and downsells.
Exactly, right? And so people are focused then on GRR instead. Daniel, do you want to chime in now on what the difference between NRR and GRR is?
Gross revenue, but then that doesn't include upsells this time.
Right,
So
right. So it might include downsells, but it's also just what's happening with your retention, right? It's more focusing on your retention, right? And that's why a lot of companies right now are just focusing on GRR, right? Because they're just trying to make certain that they can keep the logos, right? Goal, what did you want to share?
Yeah, so the discussion about how you need to be the revenue center versus the cost center. Ernesto just mentioned that at the moment they want to combine roles. So I'm thinking about our discussion yesterday in the book club, starting with why. Now that we are all in the job search, in order to be able to sell and preach the value to the customer, to show the value, you need to believe in the product, right? So otherwise it's hard. It's hard to, you know, talk about it and then show the value. So I'm just something that like my mind connected the discussion to yesterday. I said, oh, okay. So now that I'm looking and I want to know what is it for other people experience? How is it that, is it like all the jobs that I'm seeing at the moment is just, they have the upsell component to it. They want the customer success with the ability to upsell and expand the account. So what is the experience? What is your advice on this?
Well, I mean, I don't know if others want to chime in, but I would just say, you know, sometimes you need to believe in the product, and that is really important to some people. There are others, I think, even that spoke up in book club yesterday. For them, it's not so much about the product, but feeling like they believe in the company and their colleagues, right? And that they can become educated about that. If there's some companies that especially want CSMs who can do upsell and cross-sell, there's still others who are not, you know, requiring those skills. But, you know, that's something to think about, that if you want to do more upselling and cross-selling and renewals and want to get stronger in those skills, then what are some ways? Anytime you have a gap in skills, then what are some ways you want to go about and do something with that? You know, you can get those skills in lots of different ways, but if that's a priority to you, then it's something to think about, you know, going through those steps.
Awesome, thank you.
And anybody else want to weigh in on that before we move over to Kathy and finish up the night? Okay. Kathy, yeah.
I wanted to mention a theme running through our conversation in the breakout room. Wasn't a difficulty selling to customers. It was internal difficulties with like crazy expectations and tension with other departments, and just not CS not being set up to succeed. You know?
Right. Yeah, that happens frequently. I've seen CS teams where basically they got rid of the whole sales team and told the CS team, you're now going to sell and onboard and do support and everything post sales, you know, be the strategic advisor, expansion, you know, the whole bit. And there was no training or anything, right? And so in those situations, as a CS leader who's now everything, how do you handle that with the executive team and work through those things, right? Because that's part of what you now have to negotiate as a CS leader, as a leader of the team, right? Setting your team up for success.
Just had that conversation yesterday. We have a new manager, and it's like you said, Kathy, your group. We walked out and our team lead was like, I feel like everybody's being set up for failure instead of success.
Yeah. And so then what you can do as an individual contributor is call that out and say, hey, I'm all on board. We want to do this as a company. Great. I don't feel equipped to do that right now, and I'd like to be. How can we do that together, right? And if the company also doesn't have money for training and that sort of thing, maybe there's book clubs or ways you can practice with each other or things like that, And Gal, if there's ways in which you want to get better at some of your sales skills and things like that, well, maybe that's something we can, set up a channel for, and people can practice that together, right? We have mock interviews. We can do mock selling.
Yeah, definitely. And so as somebody just mentioned, salespeople get intensive training, and naturally that's something doesn't happen for CS people.
But as leaders, we should start to make the case for that, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that we can do as leaders. But as an individual contributor, you may not be able to make decisions or push back on that with the executive team. But you can call out and say, that's great. Let's do this. How are we going to be set up for success? Because they do need to hear, everybody's going through hard times. So they do need to hear something positive back from you if they want to feel like you're on the team. But at the same time, like, let's set ourselves up for success. How do we do that together?
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. This has been really fantastic to have this discussion with you. I really appreciate everything you've been contributing, coming back from your groups. I stay out here to make certain that people can come back and forth as they need to, but it's nice for you to bring it back and stay a few minutes later. Wow, 15 minutes later with me tonight. I appreciate that. So thanks a lot. And be sure to post what you love about CxXchange, okay? It's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day tomorrow.
Yeah, Valentine's Day.
All right.
Have a good one.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.